Sudesh Kaka is my name, and I help innovation enthusiasts create clarity through product design, through execution, and strategies that help them get ahead. What I want to talk to you about today is having a product portfolio that is going to make your company sustainable. What do I mean by that? What I mean is the companies like Kodak, you knew them for creating cameras and inks, and they became complacent along the way. The reason they became complacent is because they never had a structure around the product portfolio. And on the other side, when you look at companies that we call very innovative, talk about Google, talk about Apple, talk about IBM, all these companies use the same thing. I'm just putting structure to it. By what I mean by product portfolio that you group what you're doing in 3 categories, so that you'll be able not only to have constant cash flows, but you'll always be ahead of your market, and then you will always have access to other markets that you haven't advanced into. Let me give you an example. But before I give you the example, let me just show you how this works. There are 3 categories of products. There's what we call the bread and butter. The bread and butter is what brings in your cash flows every other day. For the bread and butter for Google at one time was the AdWords and Gmail. That brought in a lot of income for them. Right now, their bread and butter, what is giving them a lot of money is the Android system that they are using. They've licensed it out to Apple, they've licensed it out to lots of other phone users, but they've also bought Motorola as a hardware company to attach to what they are doing. So that is bringing in lots of money for them, cash flows. So that is the bread and butter. Now, your bread and butter can change. What is giving you a lot of cash flow these days can change. If you're a hardware and what is giving you lots of cash flow is cement, just know that can change. Yeah, but you have to be positioned and you have to have a certain kind of thinking to know that the bread and butter shifts. So the first category is the bread and butter. Absolutely. Then the second category that every company ought to have is what I call the consulting arm. Consulting means that you've done something for so long, you're so good, you've developed patterns around it, and you can license it. Case in point, Tesla comes up with the electric car. Actually, they didn't come up with the electric car, they just found a new way to sell the electric car. So Tesla comes up with this car, they sell it, it's doing so well, but they can only sell a certain number of units because a car goes for $50,000 US. Very few people have this kind of money to buy that kind of car. So what do? Money is running out, so they do the obvious. They go into their consulting arm and they start licensing out their technology. Guess who they license it out to? They license it out to lots of other traditional car dealers like Benz and Ford, all these people to try out doing electric cars. So they had their bread and butter, which was the electric car that they had made, but they also had the consulting arm. And then you have, every company ought to have the third category. Now, before I go to the third category, the second category, the consulting arm, just know it has characteristics. Things like you don't develop it immediately because you need a certain amount of experience to know the patterns of what you're doing. And then you need to monetize it and have it in a structure where you can sell it, where you can become where you can use it as a consultancy arm. For IBM, they gathered a lot of data, and right now they are selling it as a consulting arm, and it's making a lot of money for them. So just know that you need to have, first of all, the bread and butter, and then the consulting arm. And then the third category that every company ought to have is what I call out of the box. This is where you test things that you would never have thought about even doing. For Google, it was them going into self-drive cars. I mean, we know you for data, we know you bought YouTube, but look, why are you going into self-drive cars? But they were just testing it. You just test for the fun of it. Now, it is very impossible for you to have out-of-the-box ideas, I mean out-of-the-box categories, without you defining your company in a particular way. By definition, I mean you make your definition broad but also inclusive. Case in point, again, I'll refer to Google. Google is in the business of making world data useful to the end user. So if a car is going to, if a self-drive car is going to collect data about the person and their state and their eyelids and their name and you know, their fingerprints and the screen, they have already seen an opportunity to get that data and make it very useful, so they will go into that area. Okay, so remember, you need three categories. You need your bread and butter, and just know that your bread and butter can change. And then you need to have the consulting arm, and then you need the out-of-the-box ideas. Any company that doesn't have those three categories, number one, is susceptible to be wiped out because they are not forward-thinking. And number two, they will obviously, apart from just being out of business, they will hurt a lot of people. Because just imagine how many people has I don't want to hit on companies, but all the companies that have gone out because they were not forward thinking, they've had people that have lost jobs, and those people have people that are depending on them. So you don't get to stay on for long. Yeah, so apart from being wiped out, there's a bigger cost to it. So please just know that you need to have the three categories in order to stay on top of your market, to advance, and to always be the pace setters. But you cannot do that unless you define your company in a broad way, unless you're like Apple that says we are in the business of thinking different, and that gives them leeway to move from computers, that gives them leeway to move to phones, to music, to TVs. Just know that you have to do all those things. Define it, have those categories, constantly work on them, spend a lot of time, at least 50% of your time in your bread and butter, because without that you're not going to be able to advance. Spend at least 30% of your time in your consulting arm. What products are under your bread and butter? What products are under your consulting arm? And what products are under your out of the box? So spend time there and see that you advance in all those, so that you will stay ahead of your market. Thank you so much.